Welcome to the CPC Speaks Podcast. We have a special arrangement today. We're doing a podcast mashup, so to speak. I'm here with Andy Dean from Penn Medicine, Princeton House. He's also a podcaster. So what we're doing here is we're going to do a two-way interview. He's going to interview me about my specialty, which is my history with substance use and addiction and co-occurring treatment. And then I'm going to interview him about exposure therapy and OCD, which is something Andy specializes in his private practice. And it's just an interesting thing for me to learn about. That's why I invited him to this podcast. It's a learning experience for me as well.
Well, I just want to say I'm excited to be here with you. You know, you're one of my favorite people.
Likewise.
You really are.
I agreed.
And let's call out the elephant in the room.
Okay.
I'm not used to being on film, so I'm a little nervous about that. And you said you're not used to being interviewed.
Very true.
So
Very true. So we got a little...
we're both a little nervous, but we're going to
make it work.
Okay.
Use the coping skills that we're going to be talking about, right?
That's it. The reason why I wanted to talk to you is because, you know, Princeton House, we do a lot of work in the substance use field. And you're somebody I've always admired in terms of all of the good work that you've done. You don't have to say anything. I don't mean to embarrass you, but I've seen you on panels. I know you do continuing education courses for therapists on how to work with this population, how to be effective with this population. So I wanted to just pick your brain for a number of reasons. I mean, I think it would be helpful for people with addiction issues, family members for people with addiction issues, as well as therapists, right?
Sounds good.
Okay.
One thank you, by the way.
Yeah, you're welcome. So just to give you a little background, you know this already, but I guess to give the audience a little background.
Okay.
I started in this field probably between 15 and 20 years ago, which is insane to say out loud. And the first thing I did in this field was I was primarily a substance use counselor at Princeton House.
Right.
And I worked a lot with the co-occurring population. So that's when there's a mental health component as well as a substance use component. I did that for about 5 years. Now I've kind of been removed from that, from a clinical perspective for a while. So I guess I just wanted to pick your brain to see if anything's changed in the past. I mean, of course, things have changed, but just talk a little bit about how things have changed in the past 15 years or so.
Yeah.
One thing that I've noticed is a focus on harm reduction as opposed to a focus on abstinence-only treatment, right? So I guess I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about like how you kind of saw that evolve over the years and like what your take is on the effectiveness of that versus abstinence-only substance use treatment.
Okay, great question. Yeah, there's a lot to be said on that, so I don't want to talk I could go and talk a lot about it. There's a lot to be said. So, because I actually, working at CPC for 23 years, in the field 30, I kind of watched the opioid epidemic.
Yes.
Now a fentanyl epidemic, whatever you want to call it, overdose epidemic, all the terrible things going on in the substance field kind of evolved through the course of the 2000s. And that's kind of what necessitated, harm reduction predates all of that, but it's what brought it to the forefront. So yeah, treatment, when I first started in the early 2000s, I actually started in the 90s, it was much more of a 12-step abstinence-based model. And
I remember being in rooms with people who like, they would call them old timers that have been in 12-step treatment or the 12-step program forever. And they would scoff at the idea of like this harm reduction thing, many of them, right? It was like either you're not using or you're using, and there's no wiggle room.
Yeah, it was very much an expert-based model. Like, this is how I did it. I did the 12 steps and speaking from the person of the clinician's standpoint, and now let me show you the way. And then it was like, if someone didn't want to do the way, it was like, well, there's something inherently wrong with that person. Let's kick them out of treatment. And they're not ready yet. That was always the kind of the excuse. I remember when I first started, again, in the 90s, the people that were getting discharged, they were my favorite clients. I was like, why are we kicking him out? Like, hey, that's the most honest guy here. The guy who's like, I love drugs, I'm like, I want to work with that one. Yes, that guy.
I agree. And that's why I loved working with the population.
Yeah.
Because it's just, there was an inherent honesty that I found I don't know, refreshing.
Yeah, and it's challenging, but at the same time, so what ended up happening was people started to die, and unfortunately, more and more important people started to die. People with money and power, their children and things, and this thing started making things come more to the forefront. Like we got a real problem here. People are dying. We need to change. We can't just say, "Hey, you're not ready," kick you out, and then the person goes out with with heroin and now fentanyl. People were dying.
Yeah, yeah.
So it kind of necessitated this. We need to cast a wider net to kind of catch more people. And that's what harm reduction is. That's really all it is. It's instead of saying we're just going to help the people that are ready, quote unquote, ready, accepted their, you know, uh, accepted addiction in their life and all the things that, used to be required. Now it's saying, okay, this person that's still struggling, that's still using, that's still doing whatever, uh, let's help them. Let's help them from their perspective, no longer the expert base, like the clinician being the expert. Now let this person be the expert. Let's go. Let's see what they have inside them.
That makes total sense. And that was one of the thoughts I had on the way here. Just that like the drugs, the substances themselves have gotten so much more potent that you don't necessarily always get a second chance, like with fentanyl especially.
Yeah, they used to say, remember tough love? You'd go to a therapist or whatever, and then a family would say, "Oh, my son or daughter is using substances," and they'd say, "Oh, kick them out, let them," and then they kick them out and they die. And
Yeah, yeah.
you're only be the therapist that goes, "Ooh, sorry."
Right. Yeah, of course.
It's not so cut and dry.
Yeah.
I say it to people all the time. If you don't like gray area, then don't work in this field. There's a lot of gray area. There's a lot of uh, individualized situations you got to deal with, and that's what harm reduction is. It's starting where people are, letting them be the experts on themselves, and accepting incremental change. People change at their own pace.
So, like concretely, what does that look like in treatment now? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it looks like instead of someone coming in and me being the counselor and saying, "Okay, this is what we're gonna do, Andy. We're gonna get you to 12, 90 80s in 90 days, and you're gonna change all your friends, and you're gonna do this, and if you don't do that one in a week, you're a bad boy." Right? That's it's hyperbole, but
No, but that's the truth. That's how it was. It was
now we're like, okay, so here you're using whatever, and how can I meet you part way?
Yeah.
Maybe you'll say, I want to stop using this substance, but I want to continue using this one. Or I'm not changing my friends, but maybe can we help you find one friend who doesn't, working with, okay, more of a compromise and an agreement.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Starting with what you're at.
right. So like before, and I remember this, it was like, you're either sober or you're not sober, right? So let's say you come in for opiate treatment, but you're smoking weed from time to time. Then you're not sober, right? You would kind of fall into that bucket from like a treatment perspective, an abstinence only perspective.
Right.
But now it's like, all right, the focus of your treatment is opiates. So let's stop. What can we do to reduce the opiate usage as opposed to stopping every other thing?
Even that, that some people aren't even ready to stop using opiates. Maybe they'll do less, but are you making progress? Am I engaging you in your own treatment to make changes that are going to benefit your life? That's really what it is. Instead of saying I have the script that's going to save your life.
So incremental progress as opposed to
right,
like this is how it's going to be, and you're either going to stop or you're not.
Right. And I use this example all the time. Nobody changes like that. We all could. Everybody's got a hang up of some kind. One I use all the time is losing weight. And if it was so easy to lose weight, a fail script for losing weight: eat less, you cut your 12 so hard, cut it down to 1,500 calories a day, work out, and do all the things. And of course, but that's not easy to do, and not everybody's ready to do that.
Yeah.
So for some people, it's going to McDonald's 4 times a week instead of 7 times a week. And that's a moving in the right direction.
Yeah, that makes sense. This is a question I'm going to surprise you with.
God.
That I thought of on the way here.
All right, I'll surprise easy. I'll let you know.
If I'm being honest, right, when I was a clinician dealing with this, and I think this is something that families of people who are using substances struggle with too.
Yeah.
The disease model of addiction, right? It's a disease. I believe that to a certain extent, for sure.
Okay.
And then emotionally, the thing that I would struggle with sometimes is like that would seemingly take any measure of personal responsibility out of it, out of the equation for treatment. So what I'm saying is like from time to time, and I'm not saying this is always, but sometimes someone will come into treatment and they'll constantly relapse. Maybe they're chronic relapser.
Okay.
And then they'll fall back on saying that addiction's a disease as opposed to making change. Like sometimes it seems like an excuse. And I've heard this from family members of people with substance use disorders, right? So that's the first piece. The second piece
It's
is
some question.
I know.
Okay.
I told you
Yeah,
that. This
yeah.
is a real question. On the other hand, there's a genetic component to addiction, without a doubt, right? And it does look a lot like a disease
Right.
sometimes.
Okay.
So like, how do you find the middle ground there when you're working with a patient or when you're working with a family member who is struggling with this?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't get in treatment. I wouldn't get so hung up on whether or not the client believes it's a disease.
Okay.
All I care is that person going to do what they have to do to make themselves help themselves get better. So if that person, is the one you do in the work and says, "Oh, it's my disease," so what?
Well, yeah.
All right, but I'm not going to focus on that. That's negative. I'm going to focus on, okay, all right, your disease, whatever. Let's help you get better.
Yeah.
That's to me, that's like side topics. Like, what can we do to help you get better? I don't get caught up in that conversation. If someone doesn't want to believe it's a disease, good for them. They don't, as long as they're making steps to get better, that's fine. That's person-centered care.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I guess maybe I didn't frame the question the best way. But from a family's perspective, sometimes they'll voice that frustration, right? So like, what would you do with that? Or would you still say it kind of doesn't really matter?
Yeah, it might do some education. It certainly resembles a disease. Like, it depends on the definition of disease is. Like, but depression is a disease too. Some people might say, no, I don't know. Right. Disease of the mind, whatever. It resembles it. It's got symptoms. It's genetic. And you can relapse. It takes some kind of, change.
I also really like the diabetes comparison, right? Like you have to take your insulin for diabetes.
Right. Like there's some kind of regimen to get better. I mean, and again, with a family member the same way. Like, well, how can we help Andy or whoever? Like, okay, you don't want to believe it's disease. Like, I just feel like that's ecstatic.
It's almost like splitting hairs.
Yeah.
Or like an academic discussion. They're like, it kind of doesn't really matter.
There's times where it's helpful, but I don't know that it's essential. Just like in 12-step philosophy, there's, you have to admit you're an addict.
Yeah.
And that comes with stigma and things like as long as a person says, I'm at point A and I want to get to point B and I want to make some changes, then you belong in treatment.
Right.
Then you're not wasting time.
Yeah.
And even if those changes are minuscule, if a student who's failing every grade said, hey, I'm going to go get tutoring so I can get some D's, we'd still help that kid, right?
Right. Of course. Yes.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's kind of, it's from a personal perspective, getting off that throne of judgment and kind of getting down with the clients. All right, that's fine. That's from motivational interviewing. They say your role with resistance.
Wow, I'm going to ask you about motivational.
Okay.
So it's like changing the discussion, basically. Yeah. How is this helping with treatment?
An elaborative discussion.
Yeah.
It's me and you against the problem.
Right.
Not me and you on a tennis court battling back and forth on how to defeat the problem. We're on the same team.
Yeah. Nice. All right. So we're talking about family.
Yeah.
And this is something that I told you I wanted to run by you. But like,
okay,
let's say that you had a neighbor or something call you and say, I think my kid's struggling with.
that happened. Not my next one.
I'm sure you have. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I get calls about anxiety all the
I've
time.
had teachers. I've had
Yes.
people in the supermarket.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So like, what do you tell them? They're saying, what should I do? How can I help them? What do you do?
Well, it's first listen to what again, being person-centered. What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to make decisions until I know what's happening. What is what's happening? I'm going to get in this, do some kind of basic assessment with the person. But then my overarching thing to family is first kind of put it out there. There's no easy answers. There's no, hey, just do this and everything is going to get better.
Yeah, right. That's one thing.
Hold the police on her. Everything's going to get better. Yeah. It's not going to work that way. But would it work that way with cancer, diabetes, any disease, right?
Right.
It's a process. And you help people through that process through support, through love, through compassion, patience. And that would be what I would promote to a family. The stories there's a lot of stories. You hear them, you'll see them on the internet. You'll see the stories of, I didn't get better until everybody kicked me out and closed the door in my face.
I'm going to ask.
Those stories are there, and that does happen. But for every one of those stories, in my 30 years, I've heard 10 of, thank God my family never gave up on me.
Right, of course.
It's so much more popular and more common. Like, I wouldn't be here if my mom, my grandma, my uncle didn't stay there in some capacity. I get this story, and I get boundaries and limits. Absolutely important. There's times to say no. There's times to make rules and cut things off. But the complete cutoff thing, and there is a time for that too. But that's like, I call that the nuclear option. That's the last resort when you say, that's it. I'm not here for you anymore.
Interesting. I'm kind of surprised to hear you say that, to be honest, because I guess I just feel like that's so kind of out there in, I guess maybe pop culture or actually this might have more to do with the fact that I haven't been really active treating this stuff for 15 years. But I remember that was like in the rooms, in the 12-step rooms, like hitting rock bottom, right? You have to hit rock bottom. And then I hit rock bottom and then I climb my way back up. Right. Because I never want to go back to that place.
But again, there's way more exceptions to rule.
Yeah. It doesn't, like you're saying, it doesn't have to be that nuclear option or that super dramatic.
Sometimes it just happens. It's like, it's not hitting bottom. You get stories of just one day was the day.
Yeah.
And it was like, I'm done. And the change happens. And might be the 13th rehab or the 15th rehab or the 20th detox. That's why we keep sending people back.
Yeah. So is there I love that answer.
Okay.
And I'm going to push you a little bit.
Go ahead.
Because it is a process and it is love and support and stuff like that. But concrete, if you think about concrete, they want something concrete to do. What would you tell them?
Who's they?
Let's say
The family?
The family.
Some kind of communication. Sit down with a professional, with the person. Not less than one of those intervention type things, but some kind of session. The parents and the person using the substances having an honest conversation, as honest as possible.
Yeah. And
again, I want to just reiterate, there are times when there's safety issues, there are times where you have to say maybe somebody has to move out or somebody. So I don't want anybody who's watching to think it's constant. People can just run the show themselves. There are times, of course, I would tell a family okay, you've tried this many times. Maybe it's time to consider option B.
Yes, but that's not the first move.
Not the first move. See what we can get people to agree with. Sometimes it's working at CPC here. I'll be just get the person in for an assessment.
Yeah,
get them in with somebody good.
Right.
And that person is somebody good who connects with that person. I've made a career out of doing that. If you bring that person in that hates everybody, I'm gonna do my best to make them want to come back. Yeah. I'm gonna sell the idea, not in a salesman type of way, but in a way of an encouragement. You can do this. We can make this work.
Yeah. Well, good. I walked you into my next question.
Okay.
How do you do that? Because listen, we've talked about this without cameras rolling and stuff.
Yeah.
And that is something I believe that you're very good at. Engaging you as well with the patients. Thank you. But what's the secret sauce there? How do you do it?
Well, let's do a whole thing on engagement.
Tell me.
My first rule, I have rules for engagement. Number one is take time to engage. I've had kids, I always say kids. A kid could be 30, the kid's a different world nowadays. I've had people bring in somebody, convince their family member who's struggling to come in and see me, so to speak. And once for let's try this one time. And if that's all I got, I'm gonna keep casting out different lures, whatever. And if I get that person talking, I'm gonna let them talk, and whatever it might be, I'm gonna do so much listening as possible to what they want to talk about. So maybe they don't want to talk about drugs. Maybe they want to talk about anger. Maybe they want to talk about fishing. Maybe they want to talk about surfing. I've had to happen. Like I've called a parent afterwards and said, their son hated every other therapist before. And they said, oh yeah, he'll come back and see you. But they said, all you guys talked about was surfing. I was like, yeah, right. I got him to come back. And then maybe next time we talk about surfing, but I'm like, so do you get high when you surf? No, or it's that's one time I don't, or oh no, I can't surf without getting. You do it's a conversation we can continue. So you can slowly introduce things, but in taking the time to let people be people and to feel like they're part of the process because they are part of the process. How you make that Maya Angelou quote, people will forget what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel.
Right.
So
like from a clinician's perspective, this might be something that happens over the course of multiple sessions where you're just engaging with them, talking to them, connecting with them on like a human level as opposed to trying to do any kind of work.
If they're coming back, you're right. You're doing work.
Yes.
You're putting in the work.
Good point.
Because you're getting closer. You're getting every time they show back up, you're getting closer. And one thing I also say is we need to be a positive motivator ourselves. We're I say encouragement. That root word of courage. Make people feel courage, strong. I'll find one thing to make somebody feel good about every session. Like when I run a group, anybody who's seen me run a group, I always end the group. Thank you all for your participation. This group was so much more enjoyable because everybody shined. Make everybody feel good for being there. Yeah. And say it's sincere. It has to be sincere. But every session, I admire the fact that you came here. The kid could have a, F the world hat on. I want to leave earrings. Whatever. Like, skull and crossbones tattooed on the face. Where it doesn't matter. That's a person, and I'm gonna, I'm not gonna judge. I'm gonna engage. Yeah, I'd say I'm gonna,
So like, first of all, I that I totally agree with this 100%. But basically, I think what you're saying is like getting them to come back is kind of the number one priority.
Yeah, engagement is everything. You don't have engagement, you don't have treatment. Yeah, you got to be the greatest. You could go to the greatest schools in the world, learn all the skills, but if nobody comes back and sees you, who cares?
Yeah, I totally agree.
I'll take the intern with the basic skills who gets people to come back or who gets people to talk in their group.
Yes,
rather than the expert that comes in and bores everybody.
Right. Yeah, totally agree. What's the second rule for engagement?
I brought up a few in there. Encouragement. I believe in like a lot of the things that are very human. Using humor. Taking spurts of engagement. So like when you're doing an intake, sometimes it's a dreary process doing an intake. But I'll take a minute in the intake and be like, hey, you got Giants shirt on. See the game last night? What about that guy missed that field goal? A little human connection. That 3-minute talk about the Giants game. Then we get back onto the. I'm not going to spend the 45 minutes doing it.
Yeah, but it might be that I remember.
Yeah. Like you were in that band. My son likes that band. You ever go see him in a show? Whatever. That's the stuff that gets people coming back.
Yeah,
and just as far as the other tools, there's making people just feel that connection.
Mm-hmm.
Patience.
That's one of the things I've always admired about you is that I think that you're probably so good at. I've never had the pleasure of watching you work with a client, but I could totally see it. Because that's how you are in your personal life too.
I try. You know what? You know what helps for me? I get bored so easy, and I'm difficult to engage, or at least I think I am. But I try to think about what it wants to be like. Somebody drag this person. I want to make this feel as pleasant as possible.
Yeah,
for that.
Yeah, it's funny, and this might
be. I've left out my great empathy. Empathy.
Mm-hmm.
It's the bridge to human connection. That person. My goal, so besides just shooting the crap, so to speak, it kind of sounds like, the engagement piece, maybe have those little conversations. I'm doing a lot of work underground to make our person feel understood, whether I agree with them or not.
Okay, so you said you're doing empathy work, but you're kind of doing like underground or like stealth empathy work?
Yeah, in a sense that when I teach people about empathy, it's important to put your own, we're talking about from motivational interviewing, non-judgmental empathy. So you're putting your own values on the side. I don't always agree with the person I'm trying to get that empathy connection with, but I'm there to understand. I'm not there to judge. there's extreme examples. People do things that you're gonna think they'll tell you about things that you're like, whoa, I can't. That's not a good idea. But and when it's a safety issue, you might address it more head on.
Yeah.
But when you're in that engagement phase and it's not a safety issue, I'm there. Just tell me about it. And like people tell you about violence, they tell you about different crimes they commit, they tell you about different people they hurt, and you need to hear about that. You need them to talk about that. So I'm doing that empathy work. I'm just trying to get, if you're the client, you to feel Ken understands me, Ken's not judging me, and it's about your values and not mine. I'm not there. I'm not your probation officer or I'm your therapist.
Yeah. Well, that's a killer, I think, no matter what kind of treatment we're talking about, but especially with things like substance use, the judgment piece. Right. I mean, as soon as they're probably getting that enough at home or from friends and family, or even from themselves. So that's a killer in terms of building any kind of a rapport or therapeutic relationship with patient, right?
And that's another one of my tools for engagement is let go of your ego. The clinicians that succeed, put that, that expert we talked about in the beginning, get rid of the expert thing. Yeah. Use your knowledge, your expertise. And when I learned motivational interviewing, I learned about asking people permission. Do you mind if I give you my thoughts on that? Ask their permission. You let them tell you that they want to hear it or not. And there's times to give some expertise, but for the most part, I'm lowering my ego. I'm getting on your level, and it's not about, well, I know all the,
I'm the
expert of
expert.
the universe, and because that just turns people off.
Yeah.
And that's what that empathy work underground is, so to speak. It's about that connection. Regardless, I might leave the session and go, woo, glad that person doesn't live next door to me. That's a scary dude. It might be somebody who killed somebody, or But again, I'm there to be compassionate, non-judgmental. Even that person that did whatever, they have the capacity to change and be a better person. Like who doesn't have skeletons in their closet?
Me. I want to take a minute to nerd out with you for a second.
Okay.
Don't be too nervous. It's not going to go too.
Nerding out is probably the most comfortable thing you've said.
I've gotten very nerdy as I've gotten older about.
We forgot to talk about Dungeons.
No, we're not. We're not talking about that. All right, I love your D&D idea that we were talking about the other day. Modalities, right? So therapy modalities. I'm thinking about new clinicians that are coming up in the field. I just want to take a minute to ask you a couple questions that might be relevant to them.
Go for it.
So, what modalities would you say you pull from? But I mean, motivational interviewing, I think is.
When you say I'm thinking levels of care,
No. Motivational interviewing is
essential.
Right. Yeah.
You can use motivational interviewing on the cashier line at CVS. Anywhere there's potential conflict or potential ambivalence or headbutting of any kind, you can use that. You can use it even, you don't even need the headbutt, but it's a better way of connecting with people, and it's changed the field. You talk about changing back to the beginning. Yeah, motivational interviewing, in addition to the that's the other thing that's changed things. Let's start where the person is. And be client person centered.
So, is that basically what you would say you utilize when you're doing substance use treatment with somebody, or
that might be their underlying way approach? You don't need to be it helps to be an expert in it, but you don't need to be. You can still exhibit the spirit of MI, which is good, and it's again that non-judgmentality, empathy, compassion, and all those things. You want to do some skill building, some CBT, DBT is a spin-off of CBT with a lot of skill building. You want to be trauma informed, which is really, again, about engagement to me. Trauma informed is, I'm going to let you.
Can you say your line that I like about trauma informed care?
It's about being nice. Yeah. It's about, I like that line. It's about making people feel comfortable talking about whatever. And even if someone's mean, I'm going to still be nice. And I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that maybe you're being mean because something really bad happened to you. Instead of, what's the matter with this guy? Yeah. That's trauma informed. But then you're going to get it. That's not there's different techniques for trauma therapy.
Yeah, that's not trauma treatment. Yes. But that's sort of
but you have to get into that as well. So starts at different places in the process. But And there's like DBT and seeking safety or things, or there's a lot.
But like if they're looking for like a base.
Yeah, and then at CPC, MI, CBT, DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy are pretty good, a pretty solid foundation.
Yeah.
Being trauma informed the whole way.
Okay. Any advice you would have for people that are starting in this field that want to be substance use counselors? So like, I know you work with a lot of staff. I know you work with a lot of like, interns. What's like some general advice you would have for people that want to get into this field?
Oh, well, so I do supervision a lot, and it's interesting how often people already kind of know the answer. They'll tell me about a problem they had, a difficulty where they have with a client, and they'll say like, "Oh, I wanted to do this, and then I wanted to." I'm like, "Well, did you try doing that?" As if it's not something harmful or mean, like I wanted to, scream in their face. I'd say, well, maybe not, but it was like I wanted to ask them, why? And I'm like, well, you can ask a lot of questions as long as you do it in a person-centered, people-sensitive way.
Yeah.
And
So like
a lot of
second guess yourself.
a lot of supervision is guiding people how to do that, what they kind of feel the instinct to do, instead of letting fear guide you.
Right.
This field is about being uncomfortable. I tell people when I supervise and I talk about this, 30 years in, I still get nervous.
Me too.
I still get like,
Me too.
hold myself. Oh no,
I hated that
Yeah.
when I first started. And about my anxiety disorder history, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, but like, I hated that. I hated that feeling because we're not doing mathematics where there's an answer.
Right.
And that's honestly something that really gets under my skin when I hear academics or like people talking about different theories and different modalities, because how can you be 100% sure that that's really what's going to help somebody? Right? Yeah. Like there's just so much gray area.
That's what I said from the side one. Get used to gray area.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always am a skeptic of anybody who goes on the internet and says, "Oh, you want to solve this problem? Do this, 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 and this.
Yeah.
And then you'll be fine."
Right.
And most problems, one of my coworkers, Julie Edwards, one of my favorite coworkers, she brings in I've learned so much from working with her. It's about the blueberry pie example. And the blueberry pie example is that most problems are like a blueberry pie for the solution. It's very rare that like, oh, I got this problem. Here, eat blueberries and they'll get better. No, it's more like you eat a blueberry pie. You need some crust. You need a little sugar, a little of salt, whatever. Nice. And some blueberries mixed in, and you make the recipe for success. So somebody's path towards recovery for substance use might be some group, some individual.
Yeah.
Maybe go to a meeting, maybe not. Maybe it's do something spiritual, or go walk in nature, or exercise, and take medication, take Suboxone, maybe not, but finding that proper recipe for each person. It's rarely just one thing.
Yeah.
Just one pill or one.
Right.
I did this, and my problems were, good for you. Like for every one of those stories, I had to find the right mix.
Yes.
To kind of make my blueberry pie, so to speak.
Well said. And I just automatically have a bit of a what's the word? Suspicion, I guess, if somebody is saying this is the way you do it, 100%, right? Because we're working with people, and there's no two people that are exactly alike. So the answer is always going to be a little different.
Yeah, I know, and not to contradict myself, there are certain principles that will always be true. I know, yeah, of course. Yeah, I know. It's like for instance, like the friend thing. If you're gonna hang out with other people, or sooner or later, it's like, how many more times it's the hardest thing to watch. Hey, sometimes you got to say, are you sure you want to go do that? Right. Or go back in that relationship. The last 9 times you did it, you ended up in detox. Yeah. Maybe this time try it different.
Well, and again, this is me contradicting myself, but I guess, and maybe this is the last question I'll ask you. Is there like one, this is totally contradicting myself. If you had to guess, all right, where 75 to 80% of the people, like this is a piece of that pie that you were talking about, right?
Yeah.
I think that is feeling connected to something, right? Something greater than you.
Yeah.
whether that's like getting involved in meetings where you're with people more often, you develop friendships, or you start going to church, or like some other kind of activity where you're with other people. I always thought that that was kind of a really potent ingredient in that success blueberry pie that you were talking about. Um, what would you say is?
I agree wholeheartedly.
Oh, okay.
And there's part of us that feels that need to have purpose, to have sense of belonging,
Mhm.
have values. Yes, absolutely. That's a huge part of it. And helping people along that path as well. As they get better, that comes naturally as well.
That's true.
You get people to, but you do, you get people to experiment with different things, and you'll get them to you have them explore different things, and rather than just doing guesswork, and kind of find the course towards that sense of feeling meaning and purpose.
Yeah. So you stole my answer.
No, I agree with your question.
Is there anything else though?
Finding some kind of routine that
routine.
works for you.
Mhm.
Something you're not just getting up every day and binge watching Netflix. Yeah, it's rough. Yeah, there's time and place for that, but there's also, what are you going to do that's going to nurture your spirit, so to speak, and make you productive and give you goals, and again, working on values, changing what's important to you. Instead of, when you're in that life, where's my next drug? Where's my next dollar? Where's my next relief from being sick? Rather to go towards, okay, now I'm going to take all that energy I used on that and do something that's more positive and meaningful.
Mhm. You're a gentleman and a scholar.
All right. Thank you, Andy. It was a pleasure to be interviewed, and it was a pleasure for the opportunity. It was interesting to be on this side of the chair. And thanks for listening and watching, and we appreciate your support.